What's the moment you realized someone was secretly rooting for your failure, and what happened when you proved them wrong? The boss who smirked while I struggled. I had a boss, Monica, who was subtle in her dislike. Early in my first management role, she'd assign me projects with deliberately unrealistic deadlines, smiling as if to say, "Good luck, you'll see how fast this crumbles." I thought I was just underprepared. But after she commented to another colleague, "Let's see if he can handle this one," I realized she was quietly rooting for me to fail. I didn't confront her. I worked late nights, created project plans meticulously, and documented every email, decision, and approval. When the project succeeded under budget on time and praised by upper management, Monica's smug smile faltered. She had expected me to fail, and instead, her manipulations became my roadmap for success. The moment I presented the final results and she had no response but forced congratulations was one of the most satisfying of my life. The roommate who tried to derail me. During my first semester in college, I had a roommate, Greg, who had this habit of undermining me under the guise of advice. He'd say things like, "You're never going to pass that midterm, just accept it," or "Why waste your time on that club? You'll fail." I didn't realize at first how intentional it was until I caught him telling other dorm mates he expected me to quit the program. I spent months carefully building my knowledge, tutoring others in secret, and preparing for every exam as though it were a life or death challenge. When grades were released, I had the highest GPA in the class. Greg tried to brush it off, claiming luck, but everyone knew the truth. That quiet satisfaction of proving someone wrong without a single confrontation, it was intoxicating. The parent who doubted every step. I'll be honest, my mom never hid her doubt. She'd ask questions like, "Do you really think you can handle that job?" or "You're aiming too high. People like us don't get those chances." I felt a mix of frustration and quiet determination. By the time I had my first big promotion, she was expecting a stumble. I didn't tell her I had negotiated a major raise and moved into a better role. Months later, I mentioned it casually. Her pause spoke volumes. She had rooted for me to fail, and instead, I had quietly exceeded every expectation. I didn't gloat, I just lived my success, letting it speak louder than any argument could. That feeling of triumph knowing someone counted on my failure and seeing the quiet recognition was surreal. The teacher who wanted me out of the class. High school, AP Chemistry, Mr. Stone. A man who clearly thought some students were expendable. He'd make snide comments during labs, subtly suggest I'd never understand concepts, and hint to other students that I might drop out of the class. I realized he secretly hoped I'd fail. I spent countless nights studying, memorizing every reaction, and running my own experiments at home. The day of the final exam, I aced it. He had tried to predict my failure, but I quietly outworked him. When the grades were posted, I had the highest in the class. The shock on his face was almost worth the years of late-night studying almost. The romantic rival who rooted against me. I had a partner who had an ex, Nina, who had always been friendly until I started dating him. She would subtly sabotage by joking that I wasn't serious enough or capable of handling him. I overheard her telling friends she expected the relationship to end badly and maybe even hoped for it. Instead of engaging in drama, I focused on being genuine and supportive. I learned about his interests, helped him through personal projects, and invested in building a solid bond. After a year, our relationship was stronger than ever, and she had no place to interfere. The satisfaction, watching someone who hoped for your downfall realize they had no power over you. The sibling who rooted for my academic collapse. My older brother, Michael, loved to compare me to himself. Every time I expressed ambition, he'd respond with subtle jabs. "You'll never handle college," or "Not everyone can keep up with this." Eventually, I realized he secretly wanted me to fail academically, probably to preserve his sense of superiority. I buried myself in studies, joined groups he ignored, and built a network of professors and mentors. By the end of the year, I had scholarships he hadn't. When my parents praised my accomplishments, Michael's smug demeanor faltered. quiet, relentless effort had won. That sense of vindication, knowing he secretly rooted for my failure, was intoxicating. The rival colleague who cheered for mistakes. At my first corporate internship, I had a colleague, Sarah, who would subtly suggest I wasn't prepared for client presentations. She whispered to other interns that she didn't expect me to survive the first month. It hurt to realize she was rooting for me to fail. Instead of responding with drama, I meticulously prepared, anticipated every potential question, and practiced presentations obsessively. The moment I nailed my first client pitch, confidently, flawlessly with Sarah watching, was surreal. She tried to dismiss it as luck, but everyone else saw the effort and skill. The quiet triumph of proving someone wrong without confrontation was unforgettable. The friend who loved seeing me struggle. I had a friend, Sophie, who always acted supportive but loved seeing me stumble. When I started a writing blog, she'd compliment me while adding, "But it probably won't go anywhere." She'd hint to mutual friends that I was overestimating my talent. I initially laughed it off, thinking she was joking. But after a few months, it became clear. She was quietly rooting for my failure. I poured myself into my work, writing every day, learning SEO, building a mailing list. A year later, my blog had a following, partnerships, and even small sponsorships. When Sophie shared a post with our mutual friend, she was shocked at my success. The sweetest part, she had underestimated my consistency and commitment, and it quietly humbled her. The parent who thought I'd stumble. My dad always questioned my career ambitions. "Do you think you can really handle a startup?" he'd ask. I started noticing a pattern. Every time I tried something bold, he added comments that hinted he expected failure. I realized he was secretly rooting against me, maybe because of fear or doubt. I worked tirelessly, learned every aspect of entrepreneurship, and slowly built a business that gained local recognition. When I signed my first major contract, I casually mentioned it during dinner. The disbelief on his face was obvious. He had rooted for my failure, and I had quietly proven him wrong. It was satisfying without a single word of triumph, just results. The group leader who undermined me. In college, I was part of a leadership program with a lead student, Eric, who subtly undermined me. He'd criticize ideas in front of the group, whisper doubts to other members, and generally act like he was waiting for me to fail. I realized he was rooting for my collapse. I began meticulously documenting my contributions, developing detailed plans, and building allies in the group. When the final project presentation came, I delivered a flawless, creative, and organized result. Eric tried to claim partial credit, but the group unanimously recognized my leadership. Watching someone who secretly hoped for your downfall flounder while your efforts shine? Pure, silent satisfaction. My coworker smiled in my face while waiting for me to fail the promotion test. I swear every office has that one person who absolutely lives for watching other people trip on their own shoelaces. For me, it was Danielle, the human embodiment of a fake laugh at a work party. She always smiled too wide, complimented too loudly, and ended every sentence with "girl," like we were best friends. Anyway, last year our company opened a single internal position for project lead. It came with better pay, better hours, actual decision-making power, basically a ticket out of the administrative trenches. Everyone knew I wanted it. I'd been doing half the job already, and Danielle, she pretended to be supportive. "Girl, I'm so proud of you. This is your year." But the day before the skill assessment, she accidentally sent a company-wide email saying she was honestly concerned that I was burning out and maybe shouldn't push myself too hard. You know, that type of sabotage that's disguised as compassion, the kind that paints you as fragile and incompetent while the person doing it gets to act like a thoughtful citizen. Yeah, that I only found out because our HR manager, who can't keep a secret to save his life, whispered to me, "She's trying to make the board think you're too stressed for leadership." The rage I felt sat in my throat like a swallowed knife, but I didn't react. That's the key. You don't let a saboteur know you see them. Instead, I showed up early for the assessment, studied my butt off. wore my sharpest blazer, and pretended I'd never even read the email, and I destroyed the exam. I mean, I cleaned that thing like a crime scene. The interviewer literally asked if I'd taken extra certifications because my answers were unusually prepared. The next morning, the announcement went out, I got the promotion, people clapped. Danielle smiled that strange smile you only see on bridesmaids who secretly hate the bride. But the best part. Later that week, one of the VPs asked me during a meeting, all casual, "So how are you feeling? We heard there were some concerns about you burning out." I shrugged and said loud enough that the whole conference room heard, "Oh, that was just someone projecting their own insecurities onto me. I'm great." Danielle turned the color of an overboiled shrimp. The VP chuckled under his breath. Now she avoids me like I'm a closed browser tab she can't reopen. And guess who got put on a performance improvement plan after HR reviewed her mysterious email history? Sometimes proving someone wrong isn't loud. Sometimes it's just sitting there smiling while they choke on their own expectations. My dad bet against me my entire childhood. Then he watched me win. I don't talk about my dad often, mostly because he's the kind of man who thinks encouragement is raising a weakling, and affection is something that softens boys. When I was a kid, he never said you can do it. Instead, he'd say things like, "You ain't built for that. Don't embarrass yourself. You're not the type." It wasn't even rage. It was worse, it was disappointment in advance. When I turned 13, I joined a local boxing gym run by this old retired guy who looked like he'd been punched in the face by time itself. My dad hated it, said I was too skinny, too soft, too slow. He'd tell family members, he's wasting his time, like I wasn't sitting right there. But I kept training quietly. I'd go after school after homework late at night. I wasn't even great at first, but I kept going because for once, something in my life was mine. Fast forward to last year, I signed up for an amateur tournament. I didn't tell my dad, he found out through my uncle and showed up just to see how this disaster plays out. Yes, those were his exact words. He stood in the crowd with his arms crossed, already rehearsing his "I told you so" speech. And the guy I fought, he was bigger, much bigger. The kind of guy my dad would have pointed at and said, that one will destroy you." First round, I got hit hard, like can't hear straight hard, and I saw my dad shake his head slightly, like he had known this would happen. Like, he'd been waiting for it. And then, something in me snapped. Not emotionally, but almost like a quiet, still place forming in the middle of chaos. I thought, if I lose it, won't be because he expected it. It'll be because I chose to go down, swinging second round. I found my rhythm. Third round, I dominated. By the end, the other guy was gasping and stumbling, and I won by decision. My coach slapped my back so hard I almost fell over. But the real moment, the moment was when I looked over and saw my dad. He wasn't clapping, he wasn't smiling, he just looked stunned, like someone had unplugged the script he'd been reading off for 20 years. He walked up to me after and said, "I didn't think you had that in you." And I said, "Yeah, I know." Not angry, not sarcastic, just factual, just free. He didn't root for me, but he couldn't stop me. And somehow, that was enough. Now he comes to my matches sometimes. Quietly, he doesn't critique anymore. He just watches. And maybe that's his version of apologizing. Sometimes proving someone wrong isn't a victory scream. Sometimes it's just standing tall while the one person who never believed in you finally realizes you didn't need them to. My best friend secretly wanted me to fail my entire career, then I became her boss. You ever look back on a friendship and realize the whole thing was basically a long con wrapped in brunch invitations? Because that's exactly how it feels when I think about my ex-best friend, Jenna. We met in college. She was loud, chaotic, magnetic. The kind of girl who walked into a party like she owned the oxygen. I thought she was incredible. Turns out she thought I was supporting cast. Anyway, we graduated together. Both went into marketing, and for the first year it was fine. Then I got promoted, nothing huge, just a junior creative lead spot. I remember calling her that night, excited, and she said dead serious, "Oh my god, that's amazing. I honestly didn't think they'd pick you." You know how a compliment can sound like someone politely stabbing you? Yeah, that, but I brushed it off because she was my friend. And then little things started happening. I'd ask her to look over a pitch deck and she'd say, "Oh hun, they're never gonna go for that." Or she'd look at my mock-ups and laugh, "This is bold," in that tone people use when they see a toddler wearing rain boots and a dinosaur hat. I still didn't get it. I thought I was being sensitive. Spoiler, I wasn't. The real moment came a year later when our company opened a mid-level creative strategist position. It was between me and this guy named Eric, who literally fell asleep in meetings I applied. Jenna helped me prepare by telling me I should downplay my experience because it'll make you sound more humble. Thank God I didn't listen to her. I nailed the interview, got glowing feedback, and then didn't get the job. I was confused. My manager told me awkwardly, "We heard some concerns about your reliability." Reliability? I hadn't missed a deadline since college that night. While I was spiraling, another coworker texted me and said, "Hey, I think you should know. Jenna told the team, you're scatterbrained and she covers for you a lot." I don't know why she did it, just thought you should hear it. I swear my stomach dropped so hard it left my body for a second. I confronted her. She smiled, literally smiled, and said, "Oh my God, you're taking this way too seriously. I was just trying to help you seem more relatable. You're too perfect sometimes." Perfect. Perfect. My eye twitched so hard I'm surprised it didn't detach. I didn't yell, I didn't block her. I just stopped giving her access to my life. I spent the next year grinding, like my career depended on spite alone. I took every freelance contract I could handle. I built my portfolio into something sharp enough to cut glass. I went to workshops, networking events, anything that would give me an edge. And then my company merged with another agency. Guess who the new senior creative director was? Me. Guess who applied for the junior strategist role under my department? Jenna. She walked into the interview room and froze like she'd seen a ghost that still owed her money. I didn't smirk, I didn't act smug, I just asked the questions professionally, and she stumbled through every answer because she couldn't look me in the eye. I didn't hire her. Not out of revenge, she genuinely wasn't qualified. Too much partying, too little actual work. When she got the rejection email, she texted me, "Wow, congrats on proving me wrong." I guess. I didn't respond. Some betrayals aren't dramatic. They're quiet, slow leaks in a friendship you thought would last forever, but proving someone wrong, becoming the person they said you'd never be, that's the kind of justice that feels warm in your bones for years. My professor told me I'd drop out before midterms. I graduated with an award in his name. I've always been painfully shy, like the kind of shy where ordering food gives you heart palpitations. So obviously I chose engineering as my major because what better environment for an anxious person than competitive group projects with people who treat GPA like currency. My first year professor, Dr. Covington, was intense. He had this way of staring at you like he could see every mistake you were going to make in your entire career. People loved him or feared him. I fell firmly into the second category. On the first day, he asked each of us why we were majoring in engineering. People gave answers like, "I've always loved robotics," or "I'm passionate about aerospace design." I said quietly, "I like problem solving." He frowned. "That's not enough." Literally said that out loud. In front of 60 people. I wanted to melt into a puddle like a defeated snowman. Throughout the semester, he'd call on me randomly, and when I froze, he'd sigh and say things like, "You need to toughen up," or "Are you sure this is the right program for you?" Everyone heard it. Some people pitied me, some smirked. I pretended it didn't bother me, but I'd go home, sit on the floor of my dorm, and seriously consider switching majors every night. Midterms came around, I studied like my life depended on it. And as we were leaving class one day, he pulled me aside and said, "You'll probably drop out by next term. You don't have the confidence for this field." I didn't even react. I just nodded. But the words carved themselves somewhere deep inside me, so I changed quietly. I started going to tutoring sessions, office hours with kinder professors, late-night study groups. I bought a giant whiteboard and filled it with every formula that made me want to cry. I forced myself to speak in group meetings even when my voice shook. It wasn't natural, it wasn't easy, but it was survival. By junior year, something clicked. Not confidence, exactly, more like momentum. I was helping others study, leading projects, actually understanding things instead of memorizing them in panic. And then senior year came with the biggest surprise of my life. I got nominated for the Covington Award, named after that professor, given to the student who showed exceptional growth and contribution to the department. When I got called on stage, I thought it was a prank, but no, they handed me the plaque and Dr. Covington himself shook my hand. He looked older, smaller somehow, like time had sanded down his sharp edges. He said quietly, "You proved me wrong." I said, "Yes, I know," and I smiled, not out of spite, but out of relief. He nodded. He didn't apologize. Maybe he never will. But that moment was enough. I didn't need him to root for me. I rooted for myself when nobody else did, and that turned out to be more powerful than anything he ever said. I still have the plaque on my desk, not to brag, but to remind myself of who I used to be and who I forced myself to become. My roommate bet I'd fail my thesis, then had to read it at my defense. Okay, this is embarrassing but also kind of hilarious in hindsight. My roommate Jenna was the type of person who thrived on subtle sabotage. She'd say things like, "Wow, I hope your thesis advisor doesn't roast you in front of everyone. That would be awkward." She laughed when I said I wanted to analyze political rhetoric for my thesis, like she was imagining me failing epically in public. She did this consistently for months. I'd walk into our shared apartment after a long library session, and she'd be sitting there with a smirk. "So did you write something intelligent today, or just gibberish again?" One night, I had enough. I just started laughing and said, "You know what? I'm going to make you eat those words." I poured myself into the research. Endless nights of typing, editing, citing, cross-checking. Every source. I cried. I yelled at my computer. I drank ungodly amounts of coffee. Defense day comes. She's sitting in the audience. First question. My advisor asks the hardest, most nitpicky thing about my methodology. I take a deep breath, start calmly explaining the rationale, and by the end, the room is silent except for my roommate. She's staring at me, wide-eyed mouth slightly open, like she just realized she literally underestimated me. I finished the defense, got the highest marks possible, and she had to stand up and applaud in front of the whole department. The same woman who had been rooting for me to fail for months. I didn't say a word to her afterward. I just smiled as I walked out with my diploma. Later that night, she texted, okay, you win." That was actually impressive, and I just replied, "Told ya." Sometimes proving someone wrong is pure fun, and sometimes it's the most delicious irony of your life. The mentor who hoped I'd crash. When I started my first real job after college, I was assigned a mentor, Martin, who was supposed to guide me through onboarding. At first, he was extremely helpful, giving me tips, walking me through processes, and answering my questions. But after a few weeks, I began noticing subtle things. He'd omit crucial details, suggest wrong solutions, just to see if I could handle it, and casually mention my mistakes to higher-ups in ways that seemed unnecessary. It clicked slowly, like a dim light coming on. Martin wasn't helping me. He was quietly rooting for me to fail. I realized that my career trajectory could be derailed by his manipulations if I let my guard down. The thing about manipulation is that it's often invisible until you've been hurt. Instead of panicking, I documented everything: emails, chat logs, notes from meetings, screenshots of projects he tried to sabotage. I learned every weak spot in his pattern and mapped out how he operated. Then I did something he didn't expect. I over-delivered. Every task I completed was thorough, double-checked, and polished. Every small error he tried to create disappeared before it reached him. I even subtly made him appear forgetful or unorganized in minor collaborative tasks. Nothing extreme, just enough to raise doubts among other colleagues. The real climax came during a major client presentation. Martin had prepared me poorly, expecting me to stumble, but I had rehearsed in secret, refined slides and memorized every key point. The client loved it. Higher-ups were impressed. Martin could barely speak, trying to cover himself while I presented confidently. Months later, when I got my first promotion, Martin approached me awkwardly, attempting a compliment. I smiled and nodded. I didn't need to say anything. I had quietly turned the tables on someone who had counted on my failure, proving that patience, observation, and preparation can make the underdog untouchable. The best friend who secretly wanted me to fall. I grew up with a friend, Tasha, who I trusted more than anyone. We shared secrets, ambitions, dreams, the usual. But when I confided in her about applying to a highly competitive university program, I noticed subtle changes in her reactions. She'd ask questions that sounded supportive but had hidden doubt, like, "Do you think you're really ready for that?" Or, "That program is brutal, not everyone makes it." I brushed it off at first. But then I overheard her telling another mutual friend she didn't think I'd get in. I was crushed and furious. It felt like a betrayal from someone I loved, but I didn't lash out. I channeled all my energy into proving her wrong. I spent months perfecting my application, writing essays until my hand cramped collecting recommendation letters from mentors who believed in me. I stayed up late, researched every aspect of the program, and practiced interviews until I could answer questions blindfolded. When acceptance letters arrived, mine came first. I texted her casually. Guess it worked out. The silence on the other end was telling. Weeks later, I ran into her at a social gathering. She tried to act cheerful, but I could see the defeat in her eyes. She had secretly hoped I'd fail, and I had shown her that the person she thought she knew was stronger, smarter, and more determined than she had imagined. The lesson: sometimes betrayal from someone close can push you further than encouragement ever could. The colleague who laughed at my ideas. I'll never forget the first week at my new job. There was this guy, Leonard, who had been at the company for over a decade. He was charming to everyone else but consistently undermined me during team meetings. When I pitched an idea, he'd smirk, make a joke, or redirect attention. At first, I thought I was just sensitive. But then I realized he was consistently rooting for me to fail. Every presentation, every idea. He subtly manipulated the environment to make me look unprepared. I started taking notes. Not just any notes, but detailed observations of his behaviors. When he interrupted, how he phrased critiques, who he spoke to afterward. I realized the more he believed I was failing, the more influence he gained over the team. So I changed tactics. I started documenting my contributions meticulously, sending polite follow-ups to confirm decisions, and keeping track of meetings and approvals. I silently prepared for moments when he tried to overshadow me. During the next big pitch, I anticipated every interruption, every sarcastic comment. When he tried to hijack my idea in front of the department, I calmly referred to my email documentation, quoting exact points and responses. The team was impressed, and Leonard was visibly embarrassed. Afterward, he stopped undermining me. Instead, I got recognition and responsibility he had hoped to claim. It felt like watching a puppeteer get tangled in his own strings, and I didn't even have to lift a finger violently, just preparation, patience, and keeping your cool. The parent who rooted against me. My mom and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, she projected her own fears onto me, subtly suggesting I couldn't achieve things she couldn't. When I expressed interest in a career in tech, she said, "It's a boy's world. You'll see how fast they leave you behind." I ignored it for years, thinking she was just cautious. But the pattern was clear. She quietly hoped I wouldn't succeed. After college, I applied to a top-tier tech company. Every time I shared progress, her comments were backhanded. "Well, that's nice, but don't get your hopes up." I realized she was rooting for me to fail. I didn't argue. I didn't react. I focused. I studied coding relentlessly, built projects, and prepared for the interview with every resource I could find. On the day of my interview, I performed flawlessly, and I got the offer. When I called her to tell her, she was quiet for a long moment, then muttered, "Oh, that's nice." I just laughed softly. I knew she had hoped I'd stumble, and I had proven her wrong in the most concrete way possible. It was a strange, bittersweet victory, the triumph of preparation and focus over doubt, even from someone closest to you. The roommate who wanted me to fail class. I had a college roommate, Jake, who was competitive to the point of being toxic. He was smart, charismatic, and manipulative. When we were assigned to take a class together, I noticed him subtly undermining me. "Oh, that project? Good luck, you'll probably fail it." Or, "The professor doesn't like your style, just FYI." At first, I laughed it off, he was just joking, right? But I started noticing a pattern. He whispered to others that I couldn't handle the workload. I realized he was secretly rooting for my failure. Instead of confronting him, I decided to silently outsmart him. I stayed up late nights, studied every assignment, cross-checked lecture notes, and built a solid rapport with the professor. I quietly worked harder not to spite him, but because I wanted to succeed. The final project came and I scored the highest grade in the class. I watched his smug smile fade as the professor publicly praised my work. He tried to play it off, but I could tell he was shocked. Months later, he admitted to a mutual friend that he had expected me to flounder. I didn't gloat, I let the results speak. That moment taught me that proving someone wrong doesn't require confrontation, just relentless effort and quiet determination.